Good morning. We're starting this webinar of Raz-Lee education, and today we will talk about zero-day attack prevention. My name is Moshe Sofer. I'm marketing manager here at Raz-Lee Israel. We will start this webinar. First, we need to define what it is a zero-day attack. Zero-day attack is when a hacker knows a vulnerability and is able to exploit that vulnerability before the software developer can find a fix. He needs a vulnerability to exploit. Why it's called zero day? Okay, for this answer, we need to know that can be any type of broader software vulnerability. And it can take almost any form because probably is missing that encryption, or probably they can do it through an SQL injection or buffer overflowing or missing authorizations, broken algorithms, redirect URL, bugs, password security, etc., etc. So it's called zero day because it's the first time this kind of attack occurs in the lifetime of the software. How it starts? Well, this easy to follow diagram. If we start with the top, we have a vulnerability. So it's a flaw in the software and it's unknown. So it's not possible to mitigate the flaw because the software producer doesn't know that this flaw exists. And then they needed a zero-day exploit. And that's when the hacker takes advantage of the vulnerability. And it's always for malicious reasons. When they know how to take advantage, they execute this zero-day attack. They leverage the exploit and commit the cyber attack. And this is repeated over and over again on many softwares, many operative systems, and many network systems. So it's really important to know how it happens, how much time do you have, how to prevent this zero attack. For example, the execution starts with the web exploit or spam mail, and the malware is usually introduced to a user PC. So a desktop gets infected. Usually, when we talk about a zero-day attack by a ransomware, the second step is to encrypt the local files and full hard disk. But it can also be infect the local drives and the disk, and also it can be to steal information from the local drives. And then it must to have access to the network. So when this zero-day exploit knows that there is a hole in the network also, it will go to the shared PCs, to the file shares, to the server, to the shared applications, and everything will be copied to criminal networks because later they will sell this information or they will ask for a ransom. So the way a zero-day attack is executed is almost the same way that a ransomware attack is executed. So we need to take this in consideration. Then we have a very tough competition between hackers and vendors because once the vulnerability is introduced, and for example, you're upgrading a version of a software and in the middle it causes a vulnerability, then you have a little bit time between this vulnerability is discovered. So if it's discovered by a hacker, then he has enough time until the patch is deployed and completed and verified, because the vendor has to discover the vulnerability and has to disclose it, because they need to make the fix and they need to release the fix of the patch and they need to verify. So this time between the exploit release and the attack signatures released is the time in which we call it a zero-day attack, because there is no patch verified to solve the problem in that window of time. So there is also called vulnerability window, because once you have the flow in the software until you have the patch, it's all the time that they have to execute this attack and exploit the vulnerability. We have 3 prevention strategies against this, and we will follow them in detail, because the first is to stay informed. Okay, a zero-day exploit is not always publicized, but occasionally you can hear about a vulnerability. Last week, Google Chrome sent a message of updating all the Google Chrome navigators because they have a vulnerability that was used to exploit with ransomware. So if you haven't been informed, you didn't know about this, but it was a global announcement. So you have to update your Google Chrome navigator. And then if you stay tuned to the news and you pay attention to the release from your vendor, you will always have access to the security measures, or you will respond to the threat before it gets exploited. So if you get everything up to date, you will know what is happening in the developer's world. And now they usually work constantly to keep the software updated and patched. Here on Raz-Lee, we work without stop to keep the software updated, because we need to prevent the possibility of exploitation. And when a vulnerability is discovered, it's only a matter of time before they issue a patch. So you need to make sure your software is up to date all the time. So the best approach here is to take the automatic updates. I know most of the systems that are isolated or they are not connected to the internet for safety reasons, so they are only connected to the internet. But in that case, for example, you can't have the automatic updates and then pass the automatic updates via internet to the server. And the another is to take additional measures. Taking additional measures is to have security solutions that will protect you against the zero-day attack. Because the zero-day attack, it's to exploit a vulnerability in the software. So if you have enough rules and barriers to enter to your system, you could be safe of this kind of attack. So staying up to date and well informed, maybe not enough, but you can take some extra measures. Which kind of additional measures? First, when you have a multi-factor authentication, for example, every time someone is accessing to your data, someone is accessing to a program or running a command on the IBMI, there is a question that it has to be answered, and is, where are you from and who are you? Because the user, location, device, and application will access through an MFA application. So they can allow the access without MFA, they can require the access with an MFA, or they can block the access. And then, and only then, when it's verified that the user and location and that device with that application are allowed to make the changes, then it enters to the apps and data and do the task. And then we have, okay, you're inside the network, but anyway, I don't trust you. So what are we doing? We are changing from a traditional perimeter defense to a zero trust defense. So we are changing the way that the firewall works. It's not only the perimeter security, but it's also network security inside the network security. So every action taken by a user, by a process, by a program, by an exit program, it will be monitored and it will be able to have this same question. Who are you? What are you doing? Are you able to do that? So the firewall will be able to stop and detect any threat inside the network after the logout. And in case you haven't noticed, the additional measures are working on 3 different levels, because I talked about MFA with the user. So first, to make the exploit, they have to take command and control with a login and have an infected user, as I told before. So in the first place, they cannot take command and control directly because MFA protect the system against that. So in the case they have an infected user, and this infected user, it's activating a ransomware or it's activating a malware, because there is a 0-day. It has to enter through the firewall. So the firewall will check if the user can do what he can do. And in the case the user cannot, will be automatically blocked. But in the case the user that is infected has the authority to make those changes, the firewall could let it pass, because probably we didn't make a specific rule for these cases. So if we don't have that rule, the firewall will let him pass. And then he will enter the file server and he will have access to the files. But we have a third barrier that is called an anti-ransomware. And why an anti-ransomware? Okay, first, because any malicious and suspicious activity that is done in the server, like encrypting files at high speed or taking backups of different files in different directories without someone noticing, can activate the anti-ransomware. So that anti-ransomware will disconnect the attacker computer and will block the IP and will block the user momentarily and will send an alert and will activate it in other actions. So we have totally safe against a 0-day attack because we have a 3-layer protection. Before the sign-on, we're using multi-factor authentication. And multi-factor authentication is how to protect and secure the sign-on. So the iSecurity MFA is a solution that has a single step based on the person, based on the hypergroup. Single step is that we require the MFA token on the login screen. So we just need our user, our password, and the MFA token that is received through the smartphone from Google Authenticator, Microsoft Authenticator, Duo, or any other app authentication that you want to use. So first, if the hacker doesn't have the user and password and try to enter, he can succeed searching user and password, but he will not have the token. So we stop him there with the first layer. Also, the first layer is based on person and locations, and that protects us against misuse of a computer. For example, John is required to do an MFA from 4 locations: New York, Atlanta, Tel Aviv, and his home. And otherwise, he's rejected. So if someone is trying to enter with the John user, but his IP is not one of 4 IP groups, it will be automatically rejected. In the case of Natalie, she can enter from New York and Atlanta and is not required to do an MFA, but from outside, it's required for her to do an MFA. And then there's the case of Matthew that he can enter to Tel Aviv at home and it's not required an MFA because at home he's using a VPN, so it's supposedly safe. And otherwise, if someone tries to enter with Matthew credentials from another point, it will be automatically rejected. Here, trying to stop a zero-day attack, we recommend the first example: MFI required and otherwise reject. So after the sign-on, we are using the firewall because the firewall has intrusion prevention system. So first, it will has 4 layers to work, and in the very first layer is talking to me about the access point security. So he will allow, reject, and manage the control of an exit point. So an SQL injection will not work in this case. An ODBC connection will not work in this case. A TCP/IP connection will not work in this case. And then he has the normal name to service firewall, and then he has the normal user to service hardware. And finally, he has an object layer security. So we can have profile groups, and we can group our users and know with objects they can work, how management rights they have, how data rights they have. So we have a total control of what a user can do or cannot do. So if we have the specific rules and we protect the network, not only from the outside, but also from the inside, so we will be using a second layer against a zero-day attack. The firewall protection is very important because it's ongoing and incoming TCP/IP address filtering, and also it protects with FTP and Telnet and DHCP. So the user is taking care of server function and exit points and can prevent the user from performing specific actions. This is very important because usually when you have an exploit in your security, so this vulnerability will be used to make some specific actions that usually are not allowed to do by the software. But in the case they have an exploit, it will be allowed because they are using the credentials of the software. But now we are looking at the credentials of the person. So the user must have the lowest possible credentials. And you can make the internal profile groups to simplify the rule creation. So you can group all the users and give them the lowest possible credentials. Also, the users can't limit their access from specific IPs and from specific terminals. So it's not only the sign-on, it's after the sign-on, and you can block some IPs and just let the person work from the IP groups that they usually work, and they are required to do a multi-factor authentication. So you are combining both solutions to get a wall protection before the sign-on and even after the sign-on. The object security is something that you have to take in consideration because you can make rules, exceptions for a specific user. So also, not only specific users, we are working with user groups. So you can protect your objects in a rule that includes a user group. And this is very important because also secures native OS 400 and IFS objects. But in the 0-day, make the assumption that they enter with an infected PC. So it's not from outside. The attack, it's literally from the inside. And they are exploiting, and you have the rule defined. So they have entered the server finally, and they have access to the data. So in the 0-day itself, the answer is to have an anti-ransomware solution, because the anti-ransomware solution, it's different from an antivirus solution. And I want to stop here a little bit. An antivirus solution on the IBMI only will summarize the results of an attack, because the IBMI doesn't run Access files. So an antivirus solution for an IBMI take an affected file and put it on quarantine, and you can delete it. But the anti-ransomware can detect a strange behavior of an application or a user, and then he will prevent the attack, sending a signal and answering with a block. So it detects, prevents, and responds. It's different technology. It's basically a different concept. What is the concept? The first concept that we have to take in consideration is the honeypot technology. So a honeypot can be a lot of files and a lot of processes that they are running, and they are simulating an operative system. And when someone or a command or a user or a SQL injection, they touch these honeypots, the anti-ransomware automatically will know that this is an attack. I will disconnect the attacker without even asking. Then we'll send an alert and a report, and you will be able to know if you keep this PC with a suspicious activity blocked, or if you can allow this activity. First, we have to remember that since 2018, we have stopped real attacks around the world for the last 4 years using the technology of the iSecurity anti-ransomware. So it's really important to be protected from a 0-day attack with the 3 solutions, because this 3-layered solution will help you to survive the 0-day attack. And the results speak by themselves. You can find all the files corrupted, or disable the connection to the IFS and the attack failed. It's totally different without an anti-ransomware than with an anti-ransomware. As I told you, it stops the ransomware attacks immediately as they start. So even if it is a zero-day attack, it will be stopped because they have the same behavior. So as a summary, we use the multi-factor authentication, and we will prevent another person to enter with the credentials. We will not only protect the sign up, we will also protect the FTP server, the FTP client, the ODBC, and the file server, and remote program and command. These include the exit points. And then there is the firewall, that the firewall will protect the exit points on the server and all the communication protocols, and what the users can do after the access is granted. So we are protecting native and IPS subject, and we are protecting from remote logon because we can manage which IP address are able to enter and which are not. And then we have the anti-ransomware because it will identify, stop, delay, and report the attack in real time. So it will disconnect the intruder, send email the message, and this is left. And it can even manage to send information to 3 SIM at the same time. Also, it gets ransomware definition every 2 hours. So in this case, you can be totally protected against the threat of a zero-day attack. Now I'm asking if some of the attendees has questions. Any question that you have, you can publish it on the comments in the YouTube channel of Raz-Lee Security. Someone from support will answer the question immediately as soon as it arrives. If you need more information, please go to www.razlee.com. Hope you have had a good idea of how to stop a zero-day attack with this webinar, and we will see you another time. Thank you very, very much.